Hello and welcome to this video. This is a very quick first look at this thing here. This, I'm very excited to say, is the brand new Thumb Pro 4K camera from RunCam. Now, I did a video a little while ago where they brought out the first version of this, funnily enough called the RunCam Thumb. And I, along with lots of other reviewers, got it in, and although it was a really smart idea, there's no internal battery in this, it only supported kind of 1080p HD and was pretty basic. And there was one cool feature in there that most of us latched onto, because this was the time where GyroFlow was just about to be released. So because it had gyro data in it, we all tried to use it with GyroFlow and got into trouble really quickly. Now, I was back and forth with RunCam with that original camera, pleading with them to sort out the gyro issues, and eventually I think they realized that actually they were onto something with the camera like this, but that they'd missed a few key things with the original RunCam Thumb. Not to say that the original RunCam Thumb isn't a smashing little camera. I think for unstabilized 1080p, cheap and cheerful, runs off 5 volts camera, it's really good. However, lots of us wanted very similar things, and RunCam came out to lots of us and asked us for our feedback, and this was mine. So I said I wanted a higher resolution, I wanted better integration with GyroFlow, and a number of other things. And not only have they listened, they've actually, it looks like, brought out something that does even more than I asked for. So I'm guessing they asked lots of different people that same question. So the specs on this, this will do 4K at only 30 frames a second, but it will do 4K. It'll do 60 frames a second at 2.7K. It'll do 440p at 60 frames a second. It'll do 1080p at a whopping 120 frames a second, and 1080p at 60 frames a second as well. So no 720p, I'm not really bothered about that. It's a 12 megapixel sensor. Field of view on this is 150 degrees. Video format that it's saved in is MP4, and again it has a gyro built in. Micro USB on the side to connect it to your computer to get the files from it. It looks like it'll also act as a camera as well. Micro SD card capacity is 256 gigabytes maximum. It is powered again from DC 5 volts, no internal battery, but crucially this time it also has a UART on here as well. So we can now control this thing from our flight controllers. It'll pull about 500 milliamps at 5 volts. So you are going to want to make sure whatever 5 volts you use on whatever model, it's going to handle it. Now the net weight on this, before you put things like a little cable to power it at the back and the little holder that actually comes supplied in the box, is about 16 grams. But mine here is more in the region of about 20, with all the extra little bits turned on, the SD card in this as well. Now the really nice thing is they've also included the ND filters available for this as well in ND 16, 8 and 32. So that should cover you for cloudy days, bright and very bright sunshine as well. And I haven't had chance, I've only had this in for 24 hours as I'm making this video, to go through all of those scenarios, but I definitely want to test how the ND filters work. The only comment I will make is trying to get this front off the camera can be a little tricky. It doesn't just pop off. You really have to try and get your thumbnail behind that. I find that something like the blade of a penknife or something is actually easier to get it undone. And it would have been nice potentially to have a little scalloped edge or something to allow you to pop it off with a fingernail. If you look at the manual that's available on the website, it gives you all of the information. Control and how you use this thing is really straightforward. As soon as you plug it in, it's powered up pretty much, and then you stop and start recording with a single press. All of the configuration for this is done via the QR code stuff in the RunCam app, similar to how the original camera worked. And again, in here is also nicely covered all the bit rates for the different codecs, and also has how you set up the flight control, which will work in Betaflight, KISS, iNav and CleanFlight, which is fantastic. Really excited to see that. That opens it up for a whole new range of stuff as well. In terms of the modes that are available on the camera, the easiest thing to do is actually look in the app for the RunCam stuff. It's already in there, and I've been using this to play with how all the settings work. You can see here that there's a pretty extensive list of all the things that you can change, and you just double press the button on the front of the camera to put it into kind of QR code mode, and then once you have all the settings that you want, you create the QR code, you point the camera at it, and it just kind of does it and go off. It would be nice if there was some kind of confirmation beep or something that it had worked. This is a silent camera. The addition of a beep would have been nice to at least let you know when it's turning on and off, because occasionally in the last day when I've been playing with it, I have thought I pressed the button and it started recording and it actually hadn't. And some of that appears to be that the camera wants to be in the right orientation when you press the button to start and stop. If it's not, if it's facing up, for example, you can press the button, kind of nothing happens. So before I show you some footage from this thing, there is one big test that I wanted to do, and that was, does this work better with GyroFlow than the original version? And I'm very pleased to say, the initial testing that I've done here, that absolutely seems to be the case. And I'm really pleased, and thank you so much, RunCam, for listening to us all and basically making sure that that stuff works. In the current version that I'm running here, there isn't a lens distortion correction option, but I've created my own. That's a very quick and easy thing to do. But without a lot of tinkering, it's actually doing a pretty good job of stabilizing the footage. And that is a big deal. So let me show you some actual footage so you can see what this thing is like. And I'll show you some footage compared with a GoPro Hero 7 Black Edition, and also my beloved Peanut. That is probably my current favorite action camera. Here's the stats for this image on the right hand side. You can see that the color saturation is actually very good. This is a very faithful view of what the world is looking like. The sky is potentially a little bit blown out, but in terms of the crispness of everything, the color saturation, it is looking really good. This is pretty much what it looks like to the naked eye, maybe with slightly more stuff in the sky. And as we're here, we come up to the top, you can see that now we're getting a little bit more contrast in the sky as that boat poodles down the canal. Another bit of footage here as I walk by the canal. This is just under that same bridge that we walk over. Again, this is completely unstabilized. This is potentially worse for you than it is for me. Thank you to YouTube stabilization. But hopefully you can see how nice it looks. RunCam does have a tendency to slightly oversaturate the colors, and it possibly is. But in terms of the sharpness, the saturation, the color reproduction, this is actually doing a really nice job. It's a beautiful image, and there's a pretty good dynamic range here as well, looking back into the sunshine. So the initial tests from this camera and how it's performing, I would say is significantly better than the original RunCam. But what I was interested in is, how does this compare to something like a GoPro, a much more expensive camera? So putting that same footage side by side with the Hero 7 on the right hand side, we can see the differences. And there are a few. The main one I'm seeing here is that there's a little bit better contrast in the shadows on the GoPro Hero 7. There's a little bit less clarity maybe on the RunCam Thumb PRO, but with a much cheaper camera. But actually, it's doing very well. It's holding its own really against a camera that is an awful lot more expensive. And you know, you could get away with it. It's just, there's a little bit more clarity in the Hero 7 Black, but it's a much bigger lens array than in the Thumb PRO. But you know what? That's actually not a bad comparison, and quite a nice surprise, because usually putting anything up against the GoPro really shows the shortcomings of that particular camera. If we compare it with my current favourite action camera, which is the Peanut, again, the Peanut is doing stabilization within the camera, and this is the raw video that we have just looked at. In this instance, I actually prefer the picture from the RunCam Thumb PRO. I think the RunCam Thumb is doing a slightly better job on the foliage. The Peanut camera is a little bit softer. And actually, I like the clarity of the Pro compared to the Peanut. And until I actually did this comparison and rendered this out and had a look at it myself, I didn't think that would be the case. the light handling is slightly better in the RunCam Thumb in this particular instance compared to the Peanut. So I would probably say that although I would prefer the GoPro image because of the darker blacks than the RunCam Thumb, in this instance, I think I probably prefer the RunCam Thumb. Now the big caveat with all this, of course, is I've only had this for 24 hours as I'm making this video, so I'm very new to this camera. However, all of the things that I've tried with it have worked, and that was definitely not the case with its predecessor. The integration with GyroFlow and the image quality is leaps ahead of the original camera. So if you've been looking at this and wondered what it was like, that's kind of the first look. Now there is a lot more things I want to do with it, try out the ND filters in different lighting conditions, see how it handles lower light conditions as well. But first impressions are excellent with this. I'm sure lots of other reviewers will be talking about it as well, but I'll be putting it through its paces in much more detail in the coming weeks and do a considered review in probably about a month's time. But RunCam, thumbs up. I am so pleased that you listened to what pilots wanted and have given us exactly that at a really, really good price point for what it can do. Thank you for spending your time today watching that video. You can find me in all the usual places on social media, and if you're trying to learn about a subject, then check out the playlist. All of my videos are organized into easy to follow playlists that if you're trying to learn a topic will take you from the basics right the way through to some pretty advanced stuff.